Welcome to the podcast series at the College of Education and Integrative Studies. I'm Jeff Pass, Dean of the College, and we have 4 special guests today to discuss our Interdisciplinary General Education program, fondly known as IGE, and we're going to focus on 2 courses. And want to welcome Ileana and Trey and Maria, and the professor of 2 of the courses, Dr. Rosanne Welch. And Rosanne, why don't you start off telling us about the first course in the sequence?
Sure. I've had the pleasure of having all of these young people in my classes, and the last one in their sophomore year was the end of the American history sequence, which was called Technology and Human Purpose. So we're talking about the growth of the United States and the Industrial Revolution through this mirror of how technology affected us in the 1900s and how we became a world power that way.
Okay, let me stop you there for a moment. So this is part of the history requirement that the university requires as part of general education, but this is also interdisciplinary. So in what way is it interdisciplinary?
I've always laughed at how that word scares people away, but in truth, all it means is blending 2 different disciplines. So instead of simply more than 2. So instead of just teaching straight history, we're going to blend in the literature of the time, the art of the time, the music of the time in the whole course. So when kids take the Interdisciplinary General Education course, they're getting a chance to cover those GEs in a different and unique way because, frankly, the world is not compartmentalized in that way. How we live our lives is always a blend of all these things, so why shouldn't we learn about them in a blend?
Okay, so going back to the course, so this is focused on the technological developments in the United States, and what are you trying to achieve in this course?
Well, we're trying to finish out the history of the United States, get us to the point where we became a world power. And sadly, world power is someone who owns the best technology. That's been true since the Portuguese had the best navigational equipment so they could start the slave trade. That's been true through the course of history. So looking at how America attained that position through our advancements in technology is a pretty interesting way to look at history that generally people have taken in high school over and over again. So this is a different angle on it.
And why do you say sadly?
Sadly, what, that they've taken it in the past?
No, that sadly technology decides who has the power.
Because that privileges people who are in a position, countries that are in a position to achieve these things, and war-torn countries are generally not in that position. We were lucky as the United States to have not, outside of the Civil War, to have not had war on our own land, so we haven't had to rebuild ourselves in the ways that other places have.
Let's bring our attention to the students, and we'll start with any of you. Why did you enroll in this particular class? What called out to you? Trey, you look like you want to start.
There you go.
Mine's kind of like an interesting story. So I'm an engineer right now, electronic system engineering technology. And with that being said, I knew that I wanted to see like the engineering aspects of my major, but in seeing it in a historic aspect, like how does it, like my engineering applications reenact with society, and seeing like the different like sides, negative and positive like attributes of it. That was mainly what we wanted to see from this course.
So it was really relevant to your own interests as a budding engineer to be looking at technology, and perhaps if you took the course in a different way, you wouldn't have had that kind of emphasis.
Yeah, because like my major does touch on like technology in a historic sense, but only like in a like technological sense, not like in a historic sense or like society-based learning, where you can see like how does this technology reenact with like different countries or with different people, and the positive and negatives of it. But you don't never get that from like courses within industrial engineering. Sorry about that.
Trying to avoid using acronyms.
Yeah.
How about the rest of you? Why did you choose this course?
I've taken IGE ever since I was a freshman. So ever since like the enrollment day, I decided to take IGE. So I realized it's hard for me to learn history through just like long lectures and like a test right after. So especially like taking courses with Professor Welch, I realized being in a group discussion and just hearing different opinions and ideas helped me like learn more about the technology and the history and how it developed, more than if like I would just sit there and like listen to a lecture for 2 hours and have to take a test. And if I fail it, then it's like it's not the professor's fault, but it's not even my fault. You know, it's like it's a weird combination.
So for Trey, it was more of a content emphasis, and for you, it's more of a learning style preference.
Yes. I'm in liberal studies. I'm a liberal studies major.
Meaning you're studying to become a teacher?
Yes. So I want to be a teacher and like in that field, in like the school field. So I personally, what made me want to become a teacher was how I want to teach my students, which is exactly how I'm learning right now. So I feel like this is just a great course to, no matter what subject it is, you can always have a discussion, and to me personally, that's how I feel like students interact better with each other.
Right. So as a professor of education, I could say the best methods course is one where you see good teaching being modeled, and that's what you're seeing. Exactly. Okay, you're not supposed to nod at that because we're talking about you. And how about you?
Yeah, and almost going off what Maria was saying, because I'm also a liberal studies major as well, and I believe that there is a certain way to teach children and how like their learning styles would be more improved. And just by being IGE, I see that by working in group discussions and how there's always something for us to talk about. The discussion never dies out, and it's amazing to see how much we learn from others and to see like, oh, you never thought about this before while reading this, and we all read the same thing, but everyone has their own opinion, and see how much they can get from one same thing you've read.
So you're seeing that education could be much more than you've experienced in the past.
I believe you learn from others too. So.
Yeah.
Especially from others, like their past experiences. So I feel I've said a lot of like my past stories before, and people wouldn't have noticed like at all, like if I went through something like that I read, or like if we read about a story about a kid who grew up in a different environment. He had to take care of his parents because the language and like the difference, because becoming an immigrant is like hard, and you can't teach you have to teach yourself. Sorry. But so I was able to share an experience like that because I was in the same situation.
So being an immigrant yourself, you're able to bring that aspect of your personality and experience out front instead of just being a number sitting in a class receiving a lecture.
Because you hear stories, but it's rare to hear it like face to face. So when you see that, and it's different, like a lot of different stories too. It's not just me, like, and you get to find other people who can relate, who have been through the same thing, which is very good to have. You know, having that communication. I feel like you make friends easily. You can talk about it after class. We have a lot of discussions like after class on group chats. Like we always have discussions. We run into each other in school, and it's good to have someone who can relate to you.
So by being outspoken and sharing who you are, it's also helpful in making friends and building bonds that support you as you go through the challenges of higher education. And I think as long as you've mentioned it, and I know you're not shy about it, what is your immigrant background? Somebody who's watching might want to know more about that.
I was born in Iraq, in Baghdad, and I moved to Jordan in 2006, I believe. And 2 years later, I came to the U.S. And it's been 10 years now. 10, I think 11 years,
Yeah. Okay. Dr. Welch, what kind of activities do you do in this class that set it apart from the normal college traditional approach?
Gosh, the beautiful thing about IGE is that you try to do artistic things in the course of actually having the discussions, which I think is really beautiful. So we've done everything from when we study American slavery, we have classes create Underground Railroad quilts, and everyone has to make their own patch for the quilt, and we go through the history of those, both visually, and we have to watch some videos at home, and then they come in and they've got to come up with their own new idea about how would we represent the concept of freedom today based on what they've learned was what was done by the abolitionists back in the day. So that's really great.
This isn't just arts and crafts, making a quilt, and you're laughing at that, but you're actually like recreating the tradition that the enslaved people used to communicate the pathway to freedom, and exploring the concept of freedom at the same time.
Exactly. And the thing about crafts, and we're sort of giggling at the arts and crafts phrase, it's the classic gender bias. Arts are done by men, fine arts are done by men, and crafts are done by women. And these quilts were made by women who were abolitionists who wanted to help, but weren't allowed in the public sphere to make speeches and do those things. So this is how they were helping in their own underground way, which I think is important because we want to not privilege the history that we've always heard, which, is the history of white guys. And I'm married to a white guy, and my son is a white guy. So I'm very fond of white guys, but that is not the only story that there is to tell in the world. So again, IGE allows us to look at history from different perspectives, which best suits the students. And in this case, we're talking about the 20th century in the United States, which is an amazing story of immigrants from all over. My grandfather showed up in 1909 on a boat from Sicily. And to understand what that journey must have been like and how he assimilated helps me understand new kids going through that, but helps me tell that story because we've all heard about Thomas Jefferson, and I love Thomas Jefferson, but we're done now. Let's move on to the other people that built the country.
Right, and I can make the same statement about my ancestors who came over in the 1880s. So how did you respond to that new version or different version of American history?
You remember it more. You're not going to remember a lecture just of 30 minutes of the professor just going off of what you're learning. You're going to remember what you did hands-on. Because I can remember some of the things that I did in IGE from my first year just for the hands-on activity, but I can't remember any of the lectures that I've learned in some of my other classes. Just based on those hands-on activities, it helps you remember and helps make connections. Like, oh, I remember about, the quilts and the whole Underground Railroads, just based off that activity, not because of
we also, it's not that we just remember it, we can bring it on to the next courses with us. So we have like 3 years of IGE or 4 now. So it's a lot of things we've read, we've done, we can include in our writings, in our introductions, in our portfolios. So that helps us just have it, especially like in teaching moments. I would for sure go back to my portfolios and take a look at all the things we've done, all the things we've learned.
So it's not just the content that you're remembering. You're not just remembering facts, but you're getting guiding principles that you can apply to other aspects of history or social science or just life itself.
One thing I would like to add definitely about this is the fact that it's visual and also audio. And for me, I just barely discovered it, I'm a visual learner. And extremely, my audio learning is extremely low. In typical classrooms, you typically just listen to your teacher teach, and you don't reenact what you're going on, or basically you don't really stand up and write on the board every single time, or you don't feel it. And one thing in this class is I get to get up, I get to move, I get to actually remember the day because I moved within that day, in class that day. So another thing I always like to say about this is the exposure within it. One thing Professor said earlier was women might want to go towards arts and crafts, and men want to go toward technology just because what they're exposed to. And I used to always rave about this in class, is just because how you're exposed to something is very important. I was always exposed to Legos, so I want to be an engineer. But despite that, I'm going to have an artsy mind. So with that being said, I love this class because I can show my artsy, arts and crafts side of myself, but I'm still working toward technology and being an engineer.
Right, so it's all integrated.
Yes. Exactly.
Right, which is why we got the name of the College of Education and Integrative Studies.
Yes.
So let's move on to the second course. I could talk about this all day long, but the next course has a really interesting title.
It does. It was invented as we moved from the quarter system into the semester system. It was invented by the tenured staff of the IGE department, and it is called Demons, the Undead, and the Monstrous Other. It's a humanities synthesis course, and you get too many of those large syllable words in a sentence and it sounds crazy, right? Humanities synthesis, interdisciplinary. But what it means is, again, life is lived in a group. We always have different experiences all at one time. So we should learn, lifelong learning is going to be taking in many new experiences from different angles of life. So to synthesize something is to look at it from a lot of angles. So in this case, we're looking at horror films. which is funny because some kids came in and said, I don't even like horror films. But the idea...
You were one of them, Maria?
Guilty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Never catch me watching a horror film.
Exactly.
Ever.
But the idea behind it was that we need to see how culture is reflected in these films and what are the messages we're receiving. In many ways, it's a critical studies course. And I teach critical studies courses in film at other universities, so I'm kind of well placed to talk about this. But we study the idea of the growth of female characters in horror films. We've gone from what was once called the final girl, who is the last girl standing in a horror film, who's usually a screamer, to the point where Buffy the Vampire Slayer is there to save the world. So women have grown as in society we've allowed them to have more empowerment. So it's a class that looks at how this particular style of literature has affected us as culture and how culture has affected that.
Okay, so basically you get to go to class and watch movies, right? Or
That's
is
what
it-
you would think. That's what I honestly thought.
Like on
But
paper.
yeah, it's more of like what influenced these authors, these writers, these directors to come up with this horror. Is it because they're influenced off of society that we have today and hiding the real horror through movies, or is it based off of just like, because most of the things that we've learned, it's like, what was the birth of monsters? And like we learned that it was because of differences, and we were like afraid of the Phantom of the Opera because we were scared to see someone who looked different. And we can see how much that has been influenced from the 1920s up until now, and we're seeing almost the same monsters movies just based off of what we were feared before.
So you've got a new level of insight when watching horror or reading horror.
Yes.
And how about the rest of you? How did you react?
I took this course because I liked, again, like how the IGE was being taught, the discussion. So I was like, this won't be bad. I can handle a few movies. You know, I don't like horror movies. I don't watch them. And I like how this class not forced me, but kind of did force me to watch them and see that it's not all about just like the scary ones. So I think the last one, we were reading a book throughout this course, and it was called, it was by Toni Morrison, and it was called Beloved. So that wasn't your typical, like the ghost, like horror, like that something's gonna pop up. It was more of like learning how the slaves, how it affected them, not just physically, but mentally, and how one of the themes that I really liked in this book was how love can kill. Like love can literally kill you. How she, I don't know if you guys are familiar, we read it, but how she murdered her baby because of...
Spoiler alert.
Sorry, that's really in the beginning. It's not a spoiler, but yeah, so it's just things like that really interests me, and I actually did watch a few of my own. So that helped me grow out of my fear, and I'm actually like very open to like horror stories and how it's changed like throughout the years, basically.
All right, Trey?
On my end, I'm gonna tell you, I am not a fan of horror, and that will never change. It's just because it definitely can in the sense of like perspective, and I would say that this course would definitely give perspective towards horror. And like just because you're not a fan of it, it's just like you'll understand it and have a big deeper understanding of that horror film, making you want to watch it, despite you being a fan. Like for me, like I just like happy things. I just like rom-coms. That's me. Like, but on the other end is like, if I'm gonna go watch a movie, like if I'm informed about like a good horror movie, I'm gonna watch it and be very interested because there's a deeper meaning behind it, other than the fact it's gonna scare me.
Right. And what are you trying to achieve in this course? What goals are you going for?
Again, we're looking at a study of culture and how media affects culture and what lessons we are taking in from the media that we take in. And if we can analyze that, we can avoid lessons or messages we don't want.
So people are not really aware of how movies influence their cultural mindsets.
Exactly. And yet it's the entertainment form that we swallow the most all day long. And there are messages there. And that's not like, ooh, a conspiracy bad thing. There are messages. Anything has a theme. A writer is creating something to send a message, to give a lesson they would like to give to the world. If you're not looking for those, you're not prepared to understand, oh, that's a message I want, like Harry Potter is all about love and friendship and love will conquer all, and hence I think the popularity of it. But sometimes there are messages about who to trust or who are people not to trust. As Ileana was saying about Phantom of the Opera, goes back to post-World War I, when the men who were affected by burns and bombs came back and we gave them masks because we didn't have plastic surgery. So we were afraid of deformed people. Why should their physical formation have changed who they were inside? So we have to step back and say, why are we afraid of that? Let's pull ourselves away from that prejudice. Let's recognize it so we can work against it.
Okay. So you have a lot of fun teaching this course.
Yes, very much so. But largely it's because of this type of student that it attracts, because they're people who want to talk, they're good readers, they're involved and interested in being part of things, and that makes a huge difference.
Now, one of the things that I've heard about interdisciplinary general education is that there are no tests. So how do you show what you've learned? Or how have you shown what you've learned in either of these two courses?
Through our projects and our group work, and you can see it through our discussions. It's not, our discussions are not based off of summary as well. So, because I think if it was, everyone would have just waited until everyone went, and then the last person would just summarize what everyone said, which is usually, we've all been there, you know?
You've developed that skill over the years.
Over the years, yeah. But I think what's great is we do have reading responses after every reading. And that's not, it's not based on like, oh, summarize, give me like details. It's based on you read it and you give me how you feel about what you read, you know? For example, like giving examples of like how if you've been through something, if you know someone who's been through something. So I think that's how you can see how people learn more. And through our feedback, so from our reading responses from our professors, we get to see if you know, like if we continue to keep doing the same thing, you know, or add more quotes or add summarize better, you know, stuff like that.
So you get feedback from the professor and you have a chance to revise accordingly, and you ultimately do get a grade?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yes, we do. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I think that's a better way than just marking, you know, the ABC, like marking that one wrong, marking that without no explanation, without nothing, you know. That's like you have to go back and then it's like search, like where did I go wrong? What did I do? So I think this is a better way personally for me to like learn.
And to be evaluated.
To grow, yes.
Like that's a fair evaluation,
Yes.
you think?
Yes.
Okay, how about?
In a weird sense for me, I would say like mainly participation. Because like when you're in class and you ask a student like, oh, what happened in this book? It's like, you know if they didn't do it. like oh yeah, like it's just like when you see like the way they go about it, I see it all the time. Like you know, like yeah, this person obviously didn't read. But we're not gonna just call them out on it. How about you teach them in the moment? And like maybe we'll tell them what's going on for they can catch up as well. So, but one thing I really say about like the way of like grading system is I love that it's mainly participation. It's like if you're just putting your heart into it, despite like if you're not like understanding certain things, but you're really putting like more effort to understand the reading response, ask more questions within discussion if you don't understand things that you just read the other day. That's the real way that you know how like someone's getting a good grade or not, because they're putting the effort in this course, which is you can put all the effort in a lot of other courses in engineering, you still get an F. So that's one big thing for me.
I think you grow from that. I think it's definitely an advantage that you can apply into your other classes. You become more of a public speaker. You become more open. You're with the same people for 3 years. I've known most of these people for IGE from the minute I stepped into college, and you become more comfortable. And I feel like that was why Maria was able to explain about her immigrant and how like her life growing up in Jordan, Greg. Right. Yeah, like she feels comfortable enough to share that with the class, where something you wouldn't be able to have that confidence to share that in any other of your courses, because I feel like you're just so involved in that course that's not only is based off your grade, but it doesn't feel like I need to talk to get an A in this class. It just comes out more natural.
And I think if this was like in high school, maybe like I wouldn't like just come up and say like all my like my history, like where I grew up, where I was born. But I feel like this one, it was never forced to talk. It was always you're welcome to say whatever you want. So when you hear other people's stories, you feel more in a sense, like it relates to you, and you're like, oh, you know what? Let me say my side of the story. Maybe like I can help out someone. Maybe someone's like not speaking up because they think they're alone, and you can open up a whole new page of like conversations.
So how did you develop this course? Where did it come from?
As I said, it was developed by the entire department, talking and having meetings.
So the faculty get together and they design the courses collaboratively. It's not just you on your own.
No, and I mean, you are welcome to create courses, and you can either work with other people or you can do it on your own. A couple folks have created their own courses. This one, I think the interesting thing about it is a sort of a theme that crosses all the years of IGE is the business of othering, which when I speak that word outside of an academic world, people are like, I've never heard that before. But there's actually like a conference you can go to about it. The idea that we're, as a culture, used to making the other not part of our world. And so looking at that across all the years, we help people start thinking about how this is a country of immigrants, how everyone belongs here, how we have to learn about the things that are different so we're not afraid of them, because that doesn't suit, fear doesn't help anybody. So the fact that that started with that theme, and then how can we deal with that theme in a different, unique way. Again, synthesis, so we needed literature, so we're going to have the books. The other nice thing about working on it is while the bones of the course are put together, individual professors can add what they want. So I chose the book Beloved because I wanted to have American history and African American history, and I wanted to see a horror story from a different culture rather than a succession of really wonderful, but again, white male writers that we've read before. So actually we did The Haunting of Hill House, which was by Shirley Jackson, so a female take, and then Beloved by Toni Morrison. Other people are teaching The Exorcist, which is fine if you're interested in that. If your background was a religious PhD, then The Exorcist is great to unpack how there's nothing wrong with religion, but obsession with anything will cause problems. So that's a discussion you can have. So the fact that you can customize it, I think, is interesting too. And hopefully that means students, when they pick who they're taking a class with, have a sense of this is where they're going to go and this is where I'm interested in focusing my attention.
So students, how do your classmates react when you tell them about these unique courses that you're taking? Because most of them are not in the IGE program.
That's funny because for the class that I have Professor Rosanne with the Demon course, I actually invited 2 of my friends to come take that have never taken IGE before, and they completely regret not taking it before. They were like, what was I missing out on? This is the best. They're learning more from what they learned in the regular GE courses or the general education courses. They love it, and they totally regret not taking it from the beginning.
Yeah. Me too, honestly. My friend to this day, she says, how did I miss that? Because we had the enrollment for like 3 days, and I feel like that 3 days everyone just stopped listening after the first one. But she sees what we do and like the movies we make, the group projects, the posters, and she says this is something that she's interested in, and this is something she loves talking about. It's like anything, history, social media, how it affects on our lives, and all these like topics that are happening right now and that have already happened. She just regrets like not being a part of it, you know? So it's definitely someone I believe anyone who would have known it's like this would have completely changed to IGE courses instead of regular.
Do you agree, Trey?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I interact with a lot of freshmen on campus from being in housing services and stuff like that. So I do always push them to do IGE, but the thing is, since we're already in the middle of the school year, they already missed the first half. But I'm not sure if they're doing it anymore, and they're offering like a doubling up for like the first sequence and the second sequence for like the younger students. So which would be like the intro classes for IGE.
And plus there's an upper division course.
Yeah, this Demons course is an upper third year, upper division, so you don't have to have done the sequence to take this. And that's where we get a bunch of transfer students who it'll be their first semester in a 4-year school, 4-year university, so that's interesting to them. But yeah, then we get the folks who've heard about it and never did it before and hopefully have a good time.
But yeah, for most part, I always see like a lot of other friends that I have, they're like upper division, they didn't even know about IGE at all, ever their like process of school. Yeah. So with that being said, I always just throw it in like, hey, we have another GE left. They always do, because it's like the end of their year, and they always throw it in. They always love that experience and wish they did it from like beginning of school all the way to the end.
Right, and it should be mentioned for the viewers out there that this is a program that's unique to Cal Poly Pomona. there are other universities that try and do something similar, but no one does it quite the exemplary way that we do here. And I'm tooting my own horn, but I didn't develop this. I'm just proud of it. And I think your contributions today will maybe encourage other people to enroll in some of these really fantastic courses and learn a lot. I'm going to look at my calendar and see if I can squeeze a few sessions in myself. Thank you, Maria and Ileana and Trey and Dr. Welch. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.